They said the forest of Raven Hollow swallowed men whole, but no one expected it would swallow 3 veterans, leaving them hanging upside down from twisted branches, their lives draining away with every single breath. And no one, not in their wildest nightmares, expected what came out of the shadows next. A colossal black horse, its eyes burning with a memory older than the trees, stepping into the clearing as if summoned by fate itself. What happened beneath those ancient trees would shatter fear, turn prey into witnesses, and prove that even in the darkest night, salvation can arrive in the most impossible form. The wind in Raven Hollow didn't just blow, it prowled. It carried a breath as cold as a grave. The forest was a congregation of black pillars, ancient firs with bark like scarred skin, and branches that clawed at the sky. In the pale moonlight, they looked less like trees and more like monuments to some forgotten, angry god. The air was thick with resin and damp rot, and the ground was a trap of tangled roots and slick stones. Every shadow looked like a waiting mouth. Sound got weird in Raven Hollow. The wind would whistle and curl, slipping between the trees like a knife. Leaves scraped against each other in a constant, low whisper, like the forest was gossiping secrets too terrible for human ears. Far away, an owl cried out, a single sharp note that just vanished into the hush. To stand there was to feel caught between worlds, balanced on the very edge of earth and hell. And in the center of this haunted place, 3 men hung upside down from the boughs of a massive fir, their bodies swaying like broken pendulums. Jonas Rohr was the oldest, 42, carved into a figure of broad shoulders and weathered muscle by a life in special operations. The ropes cut deep into his ankles, but his eyes were steady, unblinking, locked on the dark path ahead. He was daring fate to blink first. Every breath was a rasp, every vein in his neck stood out like a cable, but he was pure defiance. Beside him swung Miguel Serrano. Younger, born of a Mexican father and an Apache mother, a lifetime of scouting had given him keen eyes and a quiet strength. But now those eyes were raw and inflamed. The ropes had already chewed through his flesh, and blood traced down his calves, dripping in a slow, mocking rhythm to the earth below. His chest heaved, sucking in air, but his jaw was clenched tight, as if he could bite the pain into submission. The third was Aaron Pike, barely 25, the youngest, and the least prepared for this kind of cruelty. Freckles on his inverted face were dark with pooled blood. A trickle ran from his nose into his hairline, mixing with sweat. His lips moved without sound, whispering broken fragments of prayers, of childhood memories. Unlike the others, his body sagged with weakness, trembling with each swing. A boy trapped in a soldier's nightmare. They looked like strange, butchered creatures, stripped of dignity and strength. Their arms reached uselessly for the ground, fingers twitching, heads throbbing with the cruel flood of blood. Every heartbeat was a drumbeat of agony. The forest had claimed many victims, but tonight it was just the stage for a show put on by men. From the darkness, boots crunched on gravel. A cone of light from a flashlight sliced through the trees, and the shadows of 2 men stretched long across the ground. Carter Vane emerged first, a brute of a man, thick with the kind of muscle that comes from violence. A scar jagged down his cheek like a knife cut, and a serpent tattoo coiled on his arm. The flashlight cast a cruel gleam across his grin as he tugged on the ropes, giving each a vicious shake. "They won't last till dawn," he muttered, the words dripping with satisfaction. Behind him walked Silas Dorn, 55, belly heavy under a tailored black coat, but his shoulders were still squared, his presence commanding. His polished shoes crunched softly on the forest floor. His steel gray hair was combed back perfectly, and his lips held a perpetual curl of disdain. He looked at the 3 prisoners, not with sympathy, but like a trader measuring livestock. The forest was his stage, the men his unwilling performers. He stopped before Jonas, whose inverted eyes glared down at him. Silas leaned in close, the sharp bite of expensive cologne filling the air. "Strength alone is never the problem," Silas said, his voice smooth and practiced. He watched the blood drip from Jonas's hair. "Weakness can be bent, molded, used, but weakness combined with defiance—" He paused, a corner of his mouth lifting. that becomes a liability, and liabilities dangle from trees. Jonas didn't answer with words. He answered with a slow seep of blood from a cracked lip, his eyes blazing silent hatred. Miguel forced sound through his burning throat. "You'll answer for this," he croaked. Silas just chuckled, a low rumble in his chest. "Answer to whom?" "The law." He gestured to the forest. "The law does not walk these woods. Only I do." Aaron just whimpered, tears cutting streaks through the red mask of his face. His body shook with a sob, the helpless cry of a boy who knew hope was dead. Silas didn't flinch. He glanced at Carter. "Leave them. The hollow will finish what we began." Carter smirked, tugged the ropes one last time, then clicked off the flashlight, plunging the forest back into a fractured silver gloom. Their footsteps faded, and silence returned to Raven Hollow like a lid closing over a coffin. Jonas, Miguel, and Aaron dangled in their torment, lost to pain, waiting for despair to finish them. And then from the far edge of the clearing, the darkness shifted. At first it was just a distortion of shadow, a thickness that didn't belong. But as the moon slid out from behind the branches, an outline took shape. A figure emerged from the tree line, vast, deliberate, and silent. It moved with the weight of something both real and unreal. A creature staggering in height, nearly 2 meters at the shoulder, its bulk eclipsing the moonlight. Its hide gleamed like polished obsidian, and its mane hung in thick, tangled strands. This was no ordinary beast. This was Umbra, the great black horse from drunken stories and fearful whispers, a specter said to haunt the hollow. The strangest part was the silence. For all its size, its hooves made barely a sound. When it breathed, hot vapor poured from its nostrils in plumes, not gentle sighs but forceful gusts like wind from a cave. And its eyes, two coals smoldering in a face carved from night. They didn't blaze with rage, but glimmered with a strange heaviness, as if the beast carried centuries of memory on its back. The clearing seemed to shrink around it. Aaron Pike was the first to see it. Half conscious, his vision blurred, he forced his swollen eyes open. What he saw sent a knife of terror through his chest. The massive shadow approached, each step deliberate, each plume of breath curling like smoke. A strangled cry tore from his throat. "Demon! Forest demon! Don't take me!" The fear made the pressure in his head unbearable. Through the haze, the great eyes of Umbra fixed on him, twin voids that seemed to reflect an ancient abyss. It felt like the end, the forest's own executioner. Miguel, swaying in his own agony, forced his lids apart. He saw the beast fully now, and rasped through cracked lips, "No! Not a demon! A horse!" The word was half prayer, half memory. He remembered tales from his Apache kin, legends of spirit horses that came when the living teetered on the edge of death. He dismissed them as stories. But now, hanging between life and death, the stories felt terrifyingly real. The horse's gaze wasn't hungry or savage. It was studying them. It was remembering. Jonas' roar forced his own eyelids open. The pounding in his skull was thunderous, but he dragged his focus to the clearing, and there he saw them, the eyes of Umbra catching his own. For an instant, the world collapsed. The pain, the ropes, all of it fell away before that gaze. What stared back was not savagery. It was memory. Jonas saw it, like a reflection on water, the flare of firelight, the crack of splintering wood, the rush of smoke. A stall door thrown wide, hooves scrambling into the night. A hand, his hand, slamming the latch open years ago when chaos consumed a prison camp. His breath hitched. "You," he whispered, the word breaking in his throat. "I know you." Umbra didn't move, but the breath from his nostrils flared, mist rolling over Jonas's inverted body. The horse's ears flicked, his head tilting slightly, as if acknowledging the words. Aaron groaned, half in panic, half in disbelief. "Jonas, it's real. It's standing right there." Jonas's eyes never left Umbra. "Not a demon," he murmured. "A survivor." Miguel's cracked lips curved into the ghost of a smile. "A spirit," he whispered, "come back not to haunt us, but to remember." The hollow was hushed, The entire forest bent to watch. Umbra took another step, his shadow covering all three prisoners. The great head lowered, and for a moment his breath washed over them, warm, alive, undeniable. And Jonas, the scar on his shoulder burning with the memory, whispered again, with absolute conviction, "Yes, I know you." The memories didn't come to Umbra in words. They came in sensations. The taste of iron in the air, the thud of hooves against hard earth, the burn of rope against skin. He remembered the chase. Once he had roamed free, a shadow larger than the others, his hooves striking thunder across high meadows. Then the men came, rising from the valley like ants, shouting, driving him with ropes that sang in the air. Nets dropped. Clubs struck his flanks. He reared, screaming, throwing men down, crushing one beneath a hoof. But the numbers overwhelmed him. Ropes pulled from every side, biting into his flesh, choking him, dragging him down. He fought until his lungs burned and his vision dimmed. Finally, he collapsed. They blindfolded him, hauled him onto a truck, and the sound of iron wheels grinding over gravel became a part of him. Then came the camp, high fences of splintered timber, a yard of mud and filth. Other horses stood in pens, thin, ribs sharp, eyes dull with terror. And there were prisoners in chains, their eyes as hollow as the horses. From the main building came Silas Dorn, his smile a thin blade, his gaze like ice. At his side, Carter Vane, with an electric prod in one hand and a steel rod in the other. The days blurred into torment. Umbra was tied to a post, forced to drag massive logs. When he balked, Carter drove the prod into his chest, the shock burning through him. When he kicked over a trough of rancid water, Carter beat him with the steel rod until his skin split and white scars formed. The pain seared into his body, never to fade. He remembered the smells more than anything. Burned flesh when the prod touched too long, the sour sweat of despair, the iron tang of blood that soaked the ground. But Umbra was not broken. Others submitted. Umbra did not. One day he rammed the fence, shattering boards. He reared, striking a man across the face. He lunged for Carter, teeth closing on his arm, tearing flesh. The rebellion lasted only minutes before the prods and rods subdued him again. The price was severe. 3 days without food, shock so long they burned patches of his hideaway. But still, he did not yield. Then came the night of fire. A storm, lightning, and then flames. Smoke roared upward, black and choking. Horses screamed, thrashing against fences that seared their flesh. Umbra was trapped, the iron gate of his pen glowing orange. The heat scalded his flanks. Through the smoke, a shape appeared. Not a guard with a whip or a rod. A man moving with purpose. He didn't shout. He simply reached for the lock. His hands were bare, his movements steady. Umbra saw only a blur, the glint of sweat, a quick twist of a wrist, and the sudden clang as the latch fell open. Then the man was gone, swallowed by smoke. But one detail lingered. The faint smell of soap, cool and sharp like crushed mint leaves. Amid the choking fire, that scent carved itself into memory. The gate swung free. Umbra surged forward into the inferno. Flames licked his mane. His hide blistered. But he ran, crashing through collapsing fences, trampling ash. He cleared the last fence and barreled into the open night, where rain lashed down in sheets. Steam rose from his scorched coat. Behind him the camp burned. Ahead the world stretched open, dark and wide. He didn't look back, but he remembered. The ropes, the fire, the screams, and the hand that opened the gate, and most of all the faint breath of mint that clung to the man's clothes. It became his tether to the world of men, not of chains, but of mercy. A single act of kindness in an endless ledger of cruelty. Umbra advanced slowly, his vast body moving with the weight of inevitability. He came to a halt at the base of the fir tree, the great crown of his head brushing against the low boughs. He lifted his neck, studying the smallest of the men, Aaron, who hung lowest. Aaron's body twitched, consciousness returning just enough for fear to find its voice. "No," he croaked. "Please, forest demon, don't take me." Umbra didn't answer in any language Aaron could understand. He shifted his weight, drawing power into his frame. Then with the force of thunder, he drove his shoulder into the trunk of the tree. The sound was tremendous, wood cracking like bones. The branch holding Aaron's rope shuddered violently. Aaron screamed, a sound torn from him by terror. For an instant, he thought he was falling into darkness. The reality was different. The rope stretched, groaned, then the knot slipped as the branch gave way. Aaron tumbled downward, his scream breaking into a cough. Umbra stepped forward, positioning his broad back beneath the falling weight. The boy's chest struck the horse's withers before he rolled to the ground. It wasn't gentle, but it saved his spine. Aaron hit the earth with a thud, unconscious but alive. Umbra turned his head, his gaze lifting to the next prisoner. Miguel had seen it, barely. He saw the massive shape lower its head, jaws parting to grasp the rope around his ankle. The sensation was sharp, teeth grinding against hemp. Then with a sudden, violent jerk, the rope snapped. Miguel dropped like a stone, the impact shooting fire through his hips and shoulders. For a moment, his vision went white. Then he was on the ground, free, 2 men down, 1 remained. Jonas Rohr hung highest, the rope biting deep, each pulse a hammer in his skull. Umbra stepped back, pawing the earth once as if bracing himself. Then he drove forward. The impact was cataclysmic. The tree groaned, its trunk quivering. Bark splintered outward. The entire canopy seemed to tremble. Above, Jonas's rope jerked violently. With a loud crack, the branch gave way. Jonas plummeted. Umbra surged forward, his shoulder angling just in time. The man collided with the curve of the stallion's body, sliding down his powerful flank before rolling onto the earth. The blow stole Jonas's breath, sending him into a fit of hacking coughs, but the deadly snap of bone against ground never came. He lay gasping, the world spinning. Then his hand moved. Shaking, bloodied, he reached toward the horse. His fingers brushed the warm flesh of Umbra's neck. His voice was ragged, almost swallowed by the night. I remember the gate. The words were just for the horse, and Umbra seemed to understand. He stood still, accepting the touch, acknowledging the truth. The clearing was quiet again. 3 men now lay on the earth, broken but free. Above them stood Umbra, a sentinel, guarding what he had salvaged from death. Marshal Keene had lived in the woods so long, the forest had become his only real companion. At 60, he was a shadow of the soldier he'd once been, stripped of uniform and rank. His hair was silver stubble, his coat a faded field jacket. He had chosen this exile in Raven Hollow. He knew its language, and that night he froze when the language broke. It came as a thunderclap of splitting wood, too loud, too violent to be the wind. Then another, deeper, as if some colossal weight had slammed into a trunk. The vibration crawled up through the roots into his bones. Instinct screamed. This was not a deer, not falling timber. This was something deliberate. He eased his machete from his shoulder and began to move, his boots making no sound on the forest floor. He heard a hollow exhale, like the breath of some giant bellows. Then the unmistakable twang of rope snapping under strain. He pushed through a thicket and stopped. The sight before him was impossible. In a clearing beneath the moonlight stood a horse. No, something larger, something mythic. Black as coal, its mane like molten shadow. At its feet sprawled 3 men. Soldiers, Keene saw immediately. The way their bodies were held, even broken, was unmistakable. They'd been strung up. The rope still dangled from shattered branches. Keene muttered, "Sweet Lord, what in God's name am I looking at?" The giant stallion turned its head at the sound, those glowing eyes fixed on Keene. For a breath, his heart clenched. The beast was massive enough to trample him in an instant. Yet the gaze wasn't predatory. It was assessing, patient. Keene understood. The horse wasn't guarding itself. It was guarding them. Slowly, carefully, Keene lowered his machete to the ground. He crouched, palms open, a gesture as old as war. I come without a threat. He rose and stepped forward. Jonas was nearest. Keene knelt, drew a small knife, and sliced through the rope binding the man's wrist. Jonas groaned, a ragged but living sound. Easy, soldier, Keene murmured, the old habit of command surfacing. He tipped his canteen to Jonas's cracked lips. Jonas coughed, then swallowed. A weak reaction, but a start. He turned to Miguel, then the boy, Aaron, cutting them free, giving them water, opening their airways. Every motion was slow, deliberate. All the while Umbra watched. The stallion's breath rolled out in long, steady gusts. His ears twitched with every sound Keen made. Once, when Keen leaned too close to Jonas, the great beast took a step forward, the muscles in its chest tightening. Keen didn't look away. He met those glowing eyes and nodded once. "I know you're watching over them," he said, his voice quiet, even. "I'm not here to take them from you. I'm here to keep them breathing." For a tense moment, the stallion held its ground. Then, as if an unspoken agreement had been reached, Umbra shifted back half a pace. He stood sentinel again, giving space but never lowering his guard. Keen returned to his work, feeling the horse's gaze burning into his back, a reminder that one mistake, one sign of betrayal, and the deal would be broken. But Keen was not a betrayer. He had walked too long in exile to mistake loyalty when it stood right in front of him, no matter what form it took. Keen knew rescue didn't end on the battlefield. You could drag men from hell, but if no one tended their wounds, they'd still slip away before dawn. He guided them through the trees, half carrying Jonas, with Miguel stumbling at his shoulder and Aaron draped over his other side. Umbra followed close, a silent, massive shadow, pressing his flank against them when they faltered. Soon a warm glow appeared ahead. A small cabin squatted by a creek, smoke curling from its chimney. Keen exhaled in relief. Clara was home. Clara Voss didn't waste time on introductions. When she flung the door open and saw Keen with 3 broken men, her eyes widened once, then sharpened with focus. She was 38, her hair in a practical knot, her face carved by fatigue but not defeat. "On the beds now," she commanded. "You've dragged them through hell. Let's see if we can drag them back." She went to Aaron first, the youngest. He was drenched in sweat, his breathing a rasp. "Dehydration, heat stroke, shock," she muttered, pulling out a battered medical kit. "Hold him," she ordered Keen, and slid a needle under the boy's skin, starting a saline drip she'd mixed herself. Minutes crawled by. Slowly Aaron's breathing evened out. "You won't die here," she murmured. "Not tonight." Miguel was next. He groaned, clutching his leg. Clara sliced through his trousers. The skin beneath was mangled purple and black, where the rope had cut deep. She poured boiled salt water on the wound. A hiss tore from Miguel's throat. His fists hammered the bed, but he didn't pull away. "You've seen worse," she said, her voice clipped but not unkind. "This won't break you." Thread and needle flashed in her hand, her stitches short and efficient. Jonas had spoken the least. Clara washed the crusted blood from his face, revealing the man under the grit. "You've been through fire," she murmured. "This is only the ash." She checked his bruised ribs, listening to the steady beat of his heart. When Miguel had regained some strength, he pushed himself upright. His hand fumbled for his boot. He shook his head at Keen's attempt to help, grim with determination. He tugged the boot free and tipped it upside down. Something thudded to the floor. A small notebook, bound in scarred brown leather. Miguel snatched it up, his fingers trembling as he flipped through pages, crammed with handwriting. Names, dates, cryptic marks. He laid it on the table with an almost holy reverence. "This," Miguel rasped. "This is everyone. Every one of them he took." Clara stepped closer. She lifted the book, flipping through the brittle pages. Dozens of names stared back at her. Then her eyes froze. Her breath caught. Her hands shook. Karen Duvall. The letters blurred. For a moment she was back in a field hospital. The stink of iodine and sweat. Karen's laugh. Karen's whispered fears. "Something's wrong," she'd said. "Someone's making people vanish on paper before they vanish in life." And then she was gone. No note, no farewell, only silence. Now here was her name, scrolled in Miguel's book. Her voice cracked. She was my friend. The cabin was silent. The only sound was the hiss of the lamp. Jonas's voice, when it came, was ragged but steady. "We don't have guns, we don't have badges, but we have the truth." He remembered Silas's words. Liabilities dangle from trees. His jaw clenched. He smacked his palm flat against the notebook. The sound cracked through the room like a shot. "If we stay silent," he said, his eyes burning, Then we died under those branches for nothing. But if we make the truth known, he loses the darkness he hides in. He can't run from the light." The words hung in the air. Miguel answered first, his voice trembling. "His men are everywhere. If we step into the open, how long do you think we'll live?" Aaron shifted weakly on his cot. "I used to think I was just a cheap hired gun," he whispered. "Disposable. But if lending my voice means something, then I'll do it. I want to do something right." Keen leaned on his knife, his face shadowed. "All my life, I've seen men hide their sins behind a badge, behind a uniform," he said slowly. "But I've also seen justice catch fire from the smallest spark. If you choose to move forward, I move with you." Clara had remained silent, her hands tight around the notebook. At last, she lifted her gaze, her eyes rimmed with unshed tears. "Karen's name is in here," she said softly. "If we do nothing, she's erased like wind on sand. I won't let that happen. I'll stand before them all and tell them what I saw. My voice will not go quiet." Jonas leaned back, breathing hard. He saw it in their faces, the fear, the doubt, but also a flicker of something more dangerous to a man like Silas: conviction. He tapped the notebook again. "It's not about killing him. It's not about revenge. We drag him into the light where lies can't survive. We raise a torch so high that every soul who's ever lost someone sees the truth." Clara nodded. "We're not alone. How many families have whispered their suspicions? How many mothers have buried empty coffins? If we give them proof, they'll come. They'll stand with us." Miguel's gaze drifted to the window. His lips moved, quiet as a prayer. "Shine the light." The phrase lingered, repeated, until it sounded like a promise. "Then we need a place," Keen said, practical even in hope. "The old salt works," Jonas replied. "No one uses it now." Clara closed the notebook. "I'll send word. Quietly. A knock on doors, a whisper. Come if you've ever lost someone and been told to forget. They'll know." "I'll keep this," Jonas said, laying a hand on the book. "When they gather, they'll see it, read it with their own eyes." Aaron lifted himself with effort. "I'll copy it all down. Every name. Nothing gets erased again." "And I," Miguel said, "will tell them what I saw. The cages, the ropes, the screams. I'll bear witness." The plan was fragile, held together by will and pain. But it was theirs. A sound stirred outside. They all froze. Keen cracked the door and peered out. In the moonlight stood Umbra, his black hide gleaming. As if hearing their resolve, the stallion tossed his head, his mane whipping in the cold air, his breath a white plume coiling like smoke. Jonas let a weary grin tug at his mouth. "Even the horse agrees." A ripple of quiet laughter broke the gloom. Jonas set his hands on the table. "Tomorrow," he said, "we light the torch." Outside, Umbra pawed the ground once, as if sealing the pact. The old salt works hadn't breathed in decades. Its brick walls were scarred with mold and graffiti, its tin roof riddled with holes that let the moon spill through in pale, slanted shafts. The air smelled of old salt, dust, and wind slithering through shattered windows. Nearly 40 souls had gathered. Farmers, factory hands, a school teacher, mothers holding sleeping infants. They stood in weary clusters, their voices low, their eyes darting to the shadows. Fear was a second skin, yet not one of them left. Jonas Rohr stepped onto an overturned salt crate. In the pale moonlight, he looked carved from stone. "We were tools," he said, his voice hoarse but carrying through the cavernous room. "Tools to be used until we had no use left. But in the days we hung from those trees, waiting for death, we saw something he could not hide. We saw the truth." He pounded a fist against his chest. "And the truth cannot be buried." Miguel Serrano hobbled into the light, his legs stiff. In his hands, he carried the battered leather notebook. "I wrote the name," he said, his voice gaining strength. "Every man and woman who vanished. Tonight you will hear them." He opened the book. "Luis Camacho, farmer, taken in April." A gasp rippled through the crowd. "Nina Harlan, salt worker, sent to Warehouse 3. Never seen again." A low moan rose from the back. "Thomas Ridley Miller, last seen in June. Karen Duval, nurse, protested working conditions. Handled." The room erupted in murmurs, grief bubbling into outrage. A woman wailed openly when her husband's name fell from Miguel's lips. Every name was a hammer blow against the wall of silence. Each syllable chipped away at the dam, and the dam was breaking. By the time Miguel closed the book, his voice was shaking, but his eyes burned bright. He had given them back their dead, one name at a time, and in doing so, he had proven their grief was not madness, but truth. Clara stepped forward, her hands pressed to her chest. "I knew her," she said softly. "Karen Duval. She told me something was wrong, that the numbers were lies." Her voice cracked. "And then she was gone. No goodbye, no trace." Her hands clenched into fists. "I thought I was alone, but her name is here, written down. Proof that she lived. Proof that he tried to erase her." A murmur rose, harsh and raw. "He didn't just steal wages," a man spat. "He stole people." The room grew still again, but it was no longer the silence of fear. It was the silence of fury, tightening like a drawn bowstring. People who had entered with slouched shoulders now stood straight, their eyes glistening not with tears, but with fire. Jonas lifted his hand. "We don't have weapons," he said. "We don't have uniforms, but we have each other. He thrives in darkness, so we raise a torch. We burn so bright he has nowhere left to hide." Miguel lifted the notebook high. Clara reached for a young mother, took her hand and held it up. "No one stands alone anymore." A rumble began at the edges of the crowd. Words quiet at first repeated, "Shine the light, shine the light." The chant swelled, voices overlapping until it filled the cavern. Men who had whispered now shouted. Women pressed babies close and lifted their free fists. The salt works emptied slowly, voices fading into the woods. Jonas, Clara, Miguel, Aaron, Keen, and Umbra remained. The air still carried the echo of their vow. That's when a scuffing boot broke the stillness. From a jagged gap in the wall, a man emerged. He was thin, his frame bent, one leg dragging with a limp. His eyes, sunken deep, were sharp with haunted memory. Jonas reached for his knife, but the man raised his hands, palms open. "I'm not armed," he croaked. "I heard you tonight, every word, and I know something you don't." The name surfaced in Jonas's mind from old rumors. Hector Alvarez, once the manager of Silas Dorn's timber camp, a man who had vanished years ago, believed to be dead. Yet here he was, a ghost risen from a shallow grave. From his coat, Hector pulled a small bundle and set it on the table. A ring of keys, corroded and crusted with rust. "These," Hector whispered, his voice fraying. "Open what Silas never meant for daylight to touch. The vault beneath the yard. The one built under concrete where no one was supposed to look. He thought me loyal. He let me keep them. But I was never loyal. I was waiting." The keys sat before them, heavy, real, undeniable. Hector's shaking hands then pulled out a folded sheet of paper, yellowed and creased. He spread it on the table. A hand-drawn map of the camp. And there, circled in charcoal, a square beneath the words, "Cement Slab." Hector tapped it. "This is the way down." He told everyone it was for storage. But I kept the records. I saw the movement. No lumber went in there. What it held was people, files, shipments. The kind that breathe going in and don't breathe coming out. Miguel's hand hovered over the map. His voice shook. "I saw this symbol once, painted on the wall inside my cell." The room grew cold. Hector's eyes brimmed with shame. "I was complicit," he choked out. "I wrote the logs, stamped the papers. At first I thought I was moving supplies. Then names appeared instead of numbers. I was erasing lives." He pressed a hand to his forehead. "When I tried to leave, Silas ordered Carter to dispose of me. I ran. I've been hiding in these woods ever since, too afraid to face what I had done." His gaze landed on the notebook. "That book," he whispered, a shaking finger pointing at it. "That book is the piece he fears most, the record he cannot scrub away. You hold the heart of his undoing." Jonas had remained silent. Now he stood, holding the map. The lamplight carved shadows into his scarred face. His voice was sharp and hard as steel. "We don't go there to burn him out. We don't go there with rifles. We go there to pull out the truth, to drag it into the open where no one can deny it. He looked around the circle. Clara's tear-streaked face, Miguel's trembling hands, Aaron's pale determination, Keen's steady watch. Umbra stood outside the doorway, a black sentinel against the night. Jonas's voice rose. The light is our weapon. The night after the salt works, the air in Raven Hollow felt different, charged, waiting. Jonas, Clara, Miguel, Aaron, Keen, Hector, and Umbra stood in a clearing near the old warehouse. The villagers who had come before lingered at the edges, a wide, uncertain ring holding sputtering oil lamps and battered cell phones. Umbra planted himself at the far rim of the circle, a fortress breathing fog into the cold. Everyone knew Silas Dorn would not let this defiance go unanswered. From down the road, the growl of engines grew louder. Headlights slashed through the trees. 3 pickup trucks barreled into the clearing. Doors slammed. Out leaped Carter Vane, a black AR-15 across his chest, his scarred face twisted in a menacing grin. Behind him poured more than a dozen men, armed with pistols, pipes, and bats. This ends tonight, Carter's voice tore across the field. He fired a burst into the sky. Villagers screamed, "Hand over the book! Hand over the traitor! Or you all bleed where you stand!" Fear surged through the crowd, but Jonas stood unmoving. Beside him, Keen shifted his stance, machete in hand. The night quivered on the edge of violence. Then Clara moved. She stepped into the open, the glow of a dozen lamps on her face. In her raised hand, a battered phone gleamed. Its camera pointed directly at Carter. Her voice rang out, steady and sharp. "My name is Clara Voss. I am a former Army nurse, and right now, we are live." A ripple ran through the crowd. "This," she declared, her phone broadcasting to the world, "is evidence. Armed men threatening unarmed citizens in Raven Hollow. The world is watching." Carter froze. "Turn that off," he barked. "You think this is a game?" But Clara didn't flinch. "Everyone can see your weapons. Everyone can hear your threats. If we vanish tonight, the world will know who held the guns." Behind her, the villagers began to chant, a murmur at first, then louder. "Shine the light! Shine the light!" The words rose, echoing off the salt works walls like thunder. Carter's finger tightened on the trigger. He hesitated. Dozens of cameras, dozens of eyes, all fixed on him. A single shot would not be silence. It would be evidence. His sneer faltered. The chant grew louder, a defiant drumbeat. Just as the air seemed ready to rip apart, a new sound cut through the night. Sirens. Red and blue lights flickered through the trees, growing closer, shredding the darkness. A convoy of black SUVs rolled into the clearing, flanking Carter's pickups. Doors opened in unison. From the lead vehicle stepped Elijah Rainier, tall, broad-shouldered, a folder bound in red sealed tape in his hand. At his side, 2 plainclothes agents, their jackets parted just enough to flash badges and holstered pistols. The atmosphere shifted in a single breath. Carter's men faltered, weapons lowering. Elijah walked calmly into the center of the clearing. His voice rolled out, deep and measured, with the weight of the law behind it. "I am Elijah Rainier, Inspector of the Department of Justice. We are here under federal authority." He raised the sealed folder. "We hold a warrant for the arrest of Silas Dorn on charges of human trafficking, forced labor, and destruction of evidence." The words fell like stones. Gasps, whispers. Carter's face drained of blood. Elijah's eyes swept across the armed men. "Any act of resistance will be considered obstruction of federal justice. You will be filmed. You will be charged. And you will fall with him." Villagers pressed forward, their phones raised high, small lights converging like stars. The beam of truth bore down on Carter and his crew, leaving no shadow to hide in. Carter's jaw clenched, his rifle dipped. One by one, pistols and pipes fell to the dirt with sharp clatters. Then, from the third SUV, flanked by 2 agents, came Silas Dorn. His hands were bound. The timber camp was no longer Silas Dorn's kingdom. Federal floodlights scorched the yard, leaving no darkness. Inside the main office, Silas sat shackled in a leather chair. The veneer of control was gone. His shirt was creased, his tie askew. Sweat trickled down his temples. "You don't understand," he shouted, his voice cracking. I am the only one who kept this cursed land alive. Without me, it rots. You fools think you're saving them. You're damning them all." The words fell flat. On the desk before him, Elijah Rainier laid out the evidence. Miguel's notebook, Hector's rusted keys, and Clara's phone, the live stream still intact, comments scrolling endlessly. "We see you. Shine the light. Justice for the hollow." Elijah read the names from the notebook, his voice calm and implacable. Luis Camacho, Nina Harlan, Thomas Ridley, Karen Duvall. Each name landed like a hammer strike. "Coincidence?" Silas croaked. "Imagination. There are no witnesses alive. None." From the corner, Marshall Keene stepped forward. "You're wrong," he said evenly. "They're outside. Every one of them. And they will speak." Silas flinched. Outside, hundreds of villagers had gathered at the gates. They filled the road, their bodies lit by lamps and phones. It was not an armed mob. There were no torches or pitchforks, only eyes, hundreds of them, fixed on the office. They stood in a silence as heavy as judgment. These were the same people who had once walked with bowed heads. Tonight, they stood tall. When the agents pulled Silas to his feet, he tried one last time to summon his old arrogance. "You think this ends me?" he bellowed. "I still have money. I still have men. You'll all regret this." Jonas Rohr stepped into his path, his voice low but sharp as a blade. "What you feared all along wasn't bullets or fire. You fear light, and now everyone sees you." Miguel leaned on his crutch. "You thought we were just tools, but tools remember, and memory has become your sentence." Clara clutched the notebook. "Karen Duvall's name is here. You erased her, but no one is erased anymore." Silas's mouth opened, but no sound came. The agents dragged him toward the door. The villagers parted, creating a corridor. As he stumbled forward, his eyes darted left and right, searching for rage, for something to push against. But there was only silence, heavy, unyielding, suffocating. They watched him as if he were already a ghost. Their eyes cut deeper than any blade. At the front of the line, an old man leaned on a cane. His voice was cracked, but it carried. "It began with a black horse," he whispered, "and it ends with the light of truth." The phrase rippled outward, a low chorus rising on the night wind, a mantra of remembrance. Days later, the forest's hush carried release, as though every tree had exhaled a breath it had been holding for years. Sunlight slipped between the leaves, casting a patchwork glow. The air smelled of earth after rain. At Clara's cabin, the survivors rested. Jonas sat on a stump by the creek, coiling the rope that had bound him. Aaron saw him and frowned. "You're keeping that?" Jonas nodded without looking up. "Why?" "Not to hold on to the pain," Jonas said, his voice gravel, "but to remind me I didn't die for nothing. To remind me not to let another man dangle in silence while I breathe." The rope was no longer a tool of torment. It was a promise. Inside, Miguel worked at the table. Before him lay fresh paper, filling with names. Luis Camacho, Nina Harlan, Thomas Ridley, Karen Duvall. He wrote them carefully, letter by letter, carving them into the page. The old notebook lay beside him as he transcribed it, like Holy Scripture. "As long as the names are spoken," he told Clara, "as long as someone sees them, those people are not erased. This book is their immortality." On the porch, Aaron Pike sat with a new notebook. The first line he wrote was steady. Day one of living for myself. He had hung from that tree, certain his end was to vanish nameless. Yet here he sat, alive. He wrote of the forest, of Umbra, of fear, of the moment he realized he did not want to die. Each line was a declaration. The journal was his rebellion. In its pages, he could build a self not owned by any man. And Umbra stayed. No tether held him, no fence kept him near. Yet every dawn he was there, grazing by the stream. Every dusk he took his post at the edge of the firelight, a sentinel. He could have vanished into the mountains, into freedom, but he chose to remain. Freedom was not always departure. Sometimes freedom meant staying, guarding, bearing witness. One evening, Clara approached him slowly, a strip of red cloth folded in her hands. "Not to bind you," she whispered, "but to remember, to remind us that some things choose to remain." She knotted the cloth gently around his thick neck. It flared bright scarlet against his black coat, a flame against shadow. Umbra did not flinch. He allowed it, as if understanding the ritual. It was not ownership, but acknowledgement. A pact, silent but indelible. The last evening came with a sunset that drenched Ravenhollow in gold. Umbra climbed the rise behind the cabin, his body colossal against the horizon, the red cloth blazing at his throat. His silhouette stretched long, spilling down to envelop the small figures below. Jonas, Miguel, Aaron, Clara, and Keen all gazed upward. They knew this image would remain with them forever. The black horse, once shackled, now standing free by his own will. A guardian, not because he was commanded, but because he had chosen to be. Umbra lifted his head and exhaled a heavy breath that rolled into the dusk like thunder. The forest answered with a reverent, unbroken silence, and in that silence, they understood. Freedom wasn't just the breaking of chains, it was the ability to choose, to walk away or to remain, to guard, to remember, to bear witness. Umbra chose to stay, and in that choice, he had saved them all. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. We'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below and let us know your favorite part. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories like this one. And don't miss out. Hit that notification bell so you're always updated on our latest content. Your support truly means the world to us.